My name is Claire Hargrove. I'm 28 years old, and I spent 6 months working in the warehouse of my father's $85 million company while he had no idea I existed. I counted inventory boxes in a basement stockroom while 14 floors above me sat Raymond Hargrove, CEO of Hargrove Logistics, the man whose name was on my birth certificate in A. Field I'd assumed was blank for my entire life. I wasn't there for the job. I was there to understand who my father was before I decided whether he deserved to know I was alive. Then a stranger named Derek Calloway walked into that building, claimed to be Raymond Hargrove's secret son from a 30-year-old affair, took over as CEO within 3 weeks, and fired me from my own father's company. He looked me in the eye on my last day and said, "Your father clearly loved me more than anyone else here. That's why he left me everything." He had no idea he was talking to Raymond Hargrove's actual daughter, and by the time I was done, he would lose everything he'd tried to steal. Before I tell you how a fake heir dismantled a company in 6 weeks, and how I used a birth certificate, a DINA test, and my mother's 29-year-old letter to destroy him in front of 400 employees, tell me, what time is it for you right now? Where are you watching from? And have you ever discovered a secret about your family that changed everything you thought you knew? I'm curious to see how many of you have lived through something like this. 6 months before Derek Calloway showed up, I was finishing my EMBA in Chicago when my mother's estate attorney called me. My mother, Ellen Weston, had passed away in November. Quietly. The way she did everything. She was a high school English teacher for 30 years, raised me alone, never married, and never once mentioned my father's name. Among the paperwork she left behind was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a single page. My birth certificate. The original. The name in the father field wasn't blank like I'd always assumed. It said Raymond Hargrove. I sat in my car in a parking garage for 2 hours trying to process what that meant. Raymond Hargrove, CEO of Hargrove Logistics, one of the largest privately held freight and supply chain companies on the East Coast. A man worth an estimated $200 million. A man I had never met, never spoken to, never even seen in person. A man who apparently had spent the better part of 30 years either not knowing I was alive or not caring to find out. I didn't know which one it was yet. That's why I applied for a job at his company. I used my mother's maiden name, Claire Weston. I applied for an entry-level warehouse inventory position. I kept my head down. I got the job in 11 days. Nobody connected the dots. Why would they? Raymond Hargrove had a daughter as far as the world knew. Her name was Melissa, 31 years old, photographed at charity galas, living in Manhattan, working in fashion. I was nobody. A warehouse worker with a clipboard and an EMBA I never mentioned. A ghost in steel-toed boots counting boxes of brake components that nobody had touched since February. My supervisor was a man named Gerald. Fair, a little gruff, never remembered my name until week 3. After that, he always called me Claire with the good handwriting because apparently my inventory logs were the most legible he'd ever seen. My coworker was Dana, 34, a single mother of 2 boys, 6 years at the company. She knew where every single item in that warehouse was located. She made the best chicken salad sandwiches I've ever eaten and brought me one every Tuesday without being asked. "You think too much," she told me on my second week. "Probably true," I said. "Stop it," she said. "Nothing good comes from thinking too much in a place like this." I didn't tell her she was right. I didn't tell her I was thinking about the man 14 floors above us who had no idea his second daughter was restocking shelves in his basement. The first 3 months were quiet. I learned the building. I learned the people. I took the stairs instead of the elevator so I could see more floors. I ate lunch in different break rooms. I listened. I watched. I was trying to understand who Raymond Hargrove was from the inside out. What I found was that people respected him at a distance. He wasn't present in day-to-day operations, but when he was in the building, the energy shifted. People straightened up. Not from fear, More like the feeling you get when someone you genuinely don't want to disappoint walks into the room. His operations director, Patricia Chan, ran things with a firm hand. HR was professional. Payroll was never late. The break rooms had real coffee, not powder. For a company this size, that actually meant something. I was starting to form a picture I didn't entirely hate. And then, everything changed. It was a Tuesday in March. Dana and I were restocking Section D7 when we heard loud voices near the loading dock entrance. I looked up and saw a man walking through the warehouse floor like he owned it. He was maybe 35, broad-shouldered, wearing a jacket that cost more than my monthly rent. Two men walked behind him, dressed like executives, pointing at things with practiced authority. "His name is Derek Calloway," Dana said quietly beside me, not looking up from her clipboard. "Showed up last week. Word is, he's Raymond Hargrove's son from a relationship nobody knew about." I went very still. "Son," I repeated. "That's what he's saying." Dana's voice was careful. HR is apparently still verifying, but he's already been given a temporary executive access badge and an office on the 12th floor. She finally looked at me. "I know. It's a lot. It was a lot." I watched Derek Calloway walk through the warehouse that day, like a man who had already decided the outcome of something that wasn't settled yet. He stopped near Gerald's station and said something that made Gerald's jaw tighten. Gerald nodded once, slowly, the way people do when they're being professional at great personal cost. That night, I sat in my car in the same parking structure. I thought about my birth certificate, about my mother's handwriting on the envelope, about the fact that she had kept this secret for 28 years. I thought about Derek Calloway's expensive jacket and the way he pointed at things that didn't belong to him yet. I went back to work the next morning, and I started keeping notes. The next 6 weeks were a slow erosion of everything that had been working. Derek moved through the company like water through a crack in a foundation. Quietly at first, then everywhere at once. He sat in on department head meetings he hadn't been invited to. He sent emails to floor managers with the subject line process review that were really just lists of things he didn't like. He questioned purchasing decisions that had been working fine for years. He told Patricia, the operations director who had built the company's reporting structure from scratch, that her system was outdated. Patricia smiled at him in a way I recognized as the last smile before a long silence. Within the first month, Derek had 2 warehouse workers fired. Both had been there over 4 years. Both had spotless records. The official reason was restructuring. The actual reason, according to Dana, was that both had quietly pushed back in meetings where Derek said something factually wrong about logistics operations. "He doesn't like being corrected," Dana said. "Nobody likes being corrected," I said. "He really doesn't like it," she said. I started keeping detailed notes in a small notebook I kept in my locker. The firing of Marcus in receiving, the memo that changed the overtime policy without going through proper HR channels. The afternoon, Derek spent 2 hours in the server room with someone from it that nobody could identify. I told myself I was just observing. Then he came for Gerald. It was a Wednesday. Dana texted me from across the warehouse. Gerald got called upstairs. Derek's office. 40 minutes later, Gerald came back down looking like a man who had just been told his house had been sold without his knowledge. He walked past me without making eye contact, which Gerald never did, and went straight into the supervisor's office and closed the door. I gave it 10 minutes. Then I knocked. "Come in," he said. He was sitting at his desk, staring at a paper, a performance improvement plan. For Gerald, who had been running this department for 9 years without a single written complaint. "Gerald," I said. "I'm fine," he said, which meant he wasn't. "What happened?" He looked up at me. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He told me I was resistant to change, that my inventory management approach was behind the times." He used the word dinosaur, Claire. He held up the performance improvement plan. "I have 60 days. I looked at the paper. I thought about Marcus in receiving. I thought about the unidentified it person. I thought about Patricia's last smile. I thought about my notebook. Gerald, I said carefully, have you ever heard anyone question whether Derek Calloway is actually who he says he is? Gerald looked at me for a long moment. Why do you ask? Because I've been here 6 months, I said, and I've been paying attention. I didn't tell him everything that day, but I asked him to hold on, to document everything, every interaction, every instruction from Derek that felt wrong. I told him I thought there was something off about Derek's story, and if I was right, the performance improvement plan wouldn't matter much longer. Gerald looked at me the way people look at someone who is either very smart or about to make a significant mistake. You're not just an inventory clerk, are you? It wasn't a question. I'm exactly an inventory clerk, I said. For now. I went home that night and called the attorney who had handled my mother's estate. His name was Paul, 70 years old, had known my mother for decades. When I told him what was happening, there was a long silence on the phone. Claire, he said, how certain are you that this Derek Calloway is not Raymond's son? I'm not certain of anything, I said. That's the problem. HR is apparently verifying his claim, but he already has access and authority, and he's already firing people. Whatever verification is happening, it's not fast enough. Another silence. Your birth certificate, Paul said, the one your mother left you. There's something you should know. When your mother came to me to draft her estate documents, she brought more than that birth certificate. She brought documentation, medical records from when she was pregnant. A letter. She said she'd written to Raymond Hargrove when she found out she was pregnant. She said he'd responded. She kept that response. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Where is it? I said. In the secondary file, he said. The one she told me only to open if you ever needed it. I drove to Paul's office Saturday morning. He had coffee waiting. The file was in a manila envelope. My mother's handwriting was on the label. I held it for a moment without opening it. Because once I opened it, the story I'd been telling myself that maybe my father simply hadn't known was going to resolve into something definite. I opened it. Raymond Hargrove had known. He'd written back. The letter was dated 29 years ago, careful and formal. What it said was that he was in the middle of a significant business transition, that the timing was not right, and that he was prepared to provide financial support if my mother agreed to a confidentiality arrangement. My mother had declined. She'd sent back the check uncashed. She'd raised me on a teacher's salary. She had never said a word. She had also, 29 years later, left me every single piece of evidence I would ever need. The medical records showing she was pregnant in 1995. The original letter from Raymond. The return check, uncashed, with his signature. A photograph of them together at a business conference in 1994. Everything dated, everything clear. I made copies of everything. I put the originals back in the file. I drove back to my apartment and sat at my kitchen table and thought about my mother, about how she had carried this quietly, practically, completely. She hadn't left me these documents as a weapon. She'd left them as a key. What door I opened with them was my choice. The moment that finally decided it for me wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday, Dana's chicken salad day. We were eating in the break room when Derek walked past the door with 2 associates, talking at full volume about consolidating the inventory department with receiving to reduce. Redundancy. Dana was sitting right there. She heard every word. She kept eating her sandwich with the careful stillness of someone who has learned that reacting costs more than it returns. After they passed, she set down her sandwich and looked at the table. My boy's dad left in 2019, she said, not looking at me. I've been holding this job like it's the last solid thing. 6 years, Claire. Never been late. Never missed a count. She looked up. If they consolidate inventory, half of us are gone. He knows that. I thought about Gerald's performance improvement plan. I thought about Marcus. I thought about an it person nobody could identify accessing the server room. Dana, I said, I need to tell you something. I told her who I was. She didn't say anything for almost a full minute. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you're recalibrating everything you thought you knew. Your last name is Weston, she finally said. My mother's name, I said. My father's name is Hargrove. Raymond Hargrove. Raymond Hargrove. She picked up her sandwich, took one bite, set it back down. Does he know you exist? He knew once, I said. Whether he remembers or cares, I don't know yet, but I have documentation that puts me exactly where I say I am. And I have reason to believe Derek Calloway's documentation does not hold up the same way. Dana was quiet for another long moment. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure the right person runs a verification, I said. Not HR, not Derek's people, someone independent. Patricia, Dana said immediately. I nodded. Patricia Chan had been Raymond Hargrove's operations director for 11 years. She was methodical, documentation-driven, and had a reputation for not tolerating anything that wasted her time. She was also the one executive in the building who had never once deferred to Derek Calloway in a way that suggested she believed his authority was legitimate. I requested a meeting through the official calendar system. Subject line, documentation review sensitive matter. She replied within 20 minutes. Tomorrow, 7 am. My office. Bring everything. I was there at 6:55. Patricia's office was clean and exact. No unnecessary furniture. One window. She had coffee already poured when I came in. She looked at me across her desk with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a particular conversation and is relieved it has finally arrived. I put the copies on her desk. Birth certificate. Medical records. My mother's documentation of correspondence. Paul's contact information. Everything dated. Everything clear. Patricia read through it without speaking. She read slowly, carefully, the way people read when they're building a legal argument in their head as they go. When she finished, she set the papers down and folded her hands on top of them. How long have you been in inventory? She said. 6 months, I said. You came here for this. I came here to understand who my father was before I decided whether to say anything at all, I said. What Derek Calloway has been doing to this company made the decision for me. Patricia was quiet for a moment. His verification through standard HR, she said carefully, has been complicated by the fact that 2 of the 3 people overseeing it were replaced last month. Derek recommended both replacements. I let that sit in the room. I'd like to request an independent verification, I said. Separate process. Legal oversight. Parallel to whatever HR is doing. That's within my authority as operations director, Patricia said. It will take approximately 2 weeks. I know, I said. In the meantime, she said, you should know that Raymond Hargrove is scheduled to be in this building on Thursday. In person. Quarterly walkthrough. I hadn't known that. He'll be in the building, I said. He will, Patricia said. She looked at me steadily. What you do with that information is entirely up to you. I went back to inventory. I counted boxes. I updated logs. I ate lunch with Dana and told her the meeting had gone well. Thursday came. I was in the middle of a receiving audit when I heard the elevator open at the far end of the warehouse floor. Raymond Hargrove walked out. I had seen photographs of him, but photographs hadn't prepared me for the particular quality of stillness he moved with. Not arrogance, just the self-possession of a man who had been making large decisions for a long time. He was 61. He looked like someone who had worked hard and was still working. He had gray at his temples and my exact nose, which I had spent 28 years thinking I'd gotten from my mother's side. He walked through the floor and spoke to workers by name. He stopped at Gerald's station, shook his hand, asked about Q1 cycle count numbers. Gerald answered. Raymond listened. The interaction lasted maybe 4 minutes. I stood 15 feet away holding a clipboard and could not move. He turned to leave. Then he stopped. He was looking at me, not with recognition, but with the particular attention of someone who has noticed something they can't immediately categorize. I was looking directly at him, which apparently most people in a warehouse do not do when the CEO walks through. He walked over. "You're in inventory?" he said. "Yes," I said. "Claire Weston." He nodded. The name meant nothing to him. He started to turn away. "Mr. Hargrove," I said. He turned back. "My mother's name was Ellen Weston," I said. "I think you knew her." The warehouse was loud, forklifts, conveyor belts, dock doors. But in the 2 seconds after I said that, all of it seemed far away. Raymond Hargrove looked at me. Really looked. At my face. "Come to my office," he said quietly. 15 minutes. I came to his office in 15 minutes. Patricia was already there. The copies were on the conference table. Raymond was standing at the window when I came in. He turned when he heard the door. We talked for 2 hours. I'm not going to describe all of it. Some of it belongs only to that room. What I will say is that my father was not a man who pretends. When he saw the documents, when he understood the full shape of what my mother had carried and what she had left me, he didn't deflect. He didn't call for legal counsel before he spoke. He sat down at that conference table and said, "I made a decision 29 years ago that I have thought about many times since. I told myself it was the right thing for the company. I've known for a long time that was a lie. There are things you imagine someone saying, and then sometimes they say them, and it doesn't fix anything, but it clarifies everything." We talked about my mother, about the letter, about the fact that she had declined his money and raised me alone, about the fact that I had worked in his warehouse for 6 months because I needed to know who he was before I decided whether he deserved to know I existed. "And," he said, "and Derek Calloway made the decision for me," I said. Raymond's jaw tightened. "Tell me everything." I told him. About the firings, about Gerald's performance improvement plan, about the server room access, about the 2 HR people who'd been replaced, about the fact that Derek's verification was being handled by people Derek had recommended. Raymond listened. Then he looked at Patricia. "How long for an independent verification?" 9 days, Patricia said. "I already started it." Raymond looked at me. "What do you want to happen?" "I want the truth," I said. "Whatever that is. And if Derek is legitimate, then I'll deal with that," I said. "But I don't think he is." "Why?" "Because he fired people for asking questions," I said. "Legitimate heirs don't do that." Derek Calloway's independent verification was completed in 9 days, not 14. What it found was that Derek was distantly related to a former business partner of Raymond's father, not to Raymond himself. The documentation Derek had submitted to HR contained altered dates on 2 key records. DNA samples Derek had provided were compared against Raymond's DNA from a medical procedure 3 years prior. No biological relationship. Probability of paternity, 0%. The IT access Derek had arranged had been used to search internal personnel files, including compensation records and ownership documentation. He had been building a case to consolidate power before anyone could verify his claims. He was escorted from the building on a Wednesday afternoon. His badge was deactivated. Security walked him out. The 2 workers he'd fired were offered their positions back. Marcus came back. Gerald's performance improvement plan was rescinded. Gerald came and found me in inventory afterward and stood in the doorway and said, "You want to tell me how you did that?" "Patricia did most of it," I said. "Patricia told me to thank the inventory clerk with the good handwriting," he said. I smiled. "Tell her she's welcome." Derek tried to fight it. He hired an attorney. He claimed the verification was biased. He demanded to see the DNA results. Raymond's legal team provided everything. Court date was set. Derek showed up with his lawyer. Raymond showed up with Patricia, his legal team, and me. The judge reviewed the evidence for 20 minutes. Altered documents, fake NA reports, fraudulent claim of paternity. "Mr. Calloway," the judge said, "not only are you not Raymond Hargrove's son, you committed fraud to gain access to a private company, fired employees under false authority, and attempted to manipulate corporate records." Criminal charges will be filed separately. This court finds in favor of Hargrove Logistics. Derek was convicted 4 months later. Wire fraud, identity fraud, corporate espionage. 7 years federal prison. Ordered to pay $2.5 million in restitution to the company and the workers he'd wrongfully terminated. I didn't go to his sentencing. I had other things to do. The harder conversations came in the weeks after Derek was removed. Raymond and I met 3 more times before we met for dinner. Dinner before we met with attorneys. Attorneys before anything was formally established. I wasn't looking for an inheritance. I wasn't looking to be inserted into the company structure overnight. What I was looking for was clarity. And I had found it. It was complicated. It was real. It was mine. His daughter, Melissa, called me. That conversation was its own story. It went better than I expected and worse than I hoped. By the end of it, we had agreed to have lunch, which felt like enough for now. I kept working in inventory for another 6 weeks while everything was sorted out. I know that sounds strange, but I liked the work. I liked the logic of it. Things in their right places. Counts that balanced. A system that functioned because someone was paying attention. I liked Dana's Tuesday sandwiches. I liked that Gerald called me Claire with the good handwriting until my very last day. On my last Friday, Dana walked me to the parking structure. We stood at my car for a few minutes. "What happens now?" she said. "Something different," I said. "I'm being brought into corporate operations, learning the business from the inside. Patricia's going to mentor me. The inventory department is going to fall apart without you," Donna said. "You'll be fine," I said. "You know where everything is." "I mean the vibe," she said. "The vibe is going to fall apart." I laughed. Then I reached into my bag and took out an envelope. "What is this?" she said. "It's enough to cover your boys' school supplies through graduation and a year's worth of the aftercare program you said you had to pull them from," I said. "And a little extra for the vibe." Dana held the envelope and didn't say anything for a long moment. "Claire Weston," she said. "Claire Hargrove," I said. "Officially, as of last Tuesday." She held the envelope to her chest. Then she looked at me. "Your mother raised you right," she said. I thought about my mother, about a sealed envelope in a file, about a teacher's salary and 28 years of quiet, about how she hadn't left me a weapon or a fortune or even a direction. She'd left me a door and the good sense to figure out when to open it. She really did, I said. 6 months ago, I was a warehouse inventory clerk counting boxes in the basement of my father's company while he had no idea I existed. A stranger walked in, claimed to be Raymond Hargrove's secret son, took over as CEO, and fired me from my own father's company. He told me my father loved him more. He had no idea he was talking to Raymond Hargrove's actual daughter, and by the time I was done, he lost everything. 7 years in federal prison. $2.5 million in restitution. And I got my father back. Not the way I'd imagined, but the way it actually was. Complicated. Real. Mine. My mother kept a secret for 28 years. She left me a birth certificate, a letter, and the choice of what to do with them. I chose to find out who my father was. And in the process, I saved his company from a man who tried to steal it. So tell me honestly, if you discovered you had a parent you never knew about, would you seek them out or let it stay hidden? And if someone tried to steal what was rightfully yours, how far would you go to take it back? I'll be reading your answers. Our team puts a lot of care into creating fictional stories that feel intense, emotional, and full of useful life lessons. This story is not based on real events, and it's made only for entertainment, education, and reflection. We hope viewers can take away a message about truth, family, and standing up for what's right. Thank you for watching.